Welcome back, I am Captain Xavier, and today I'm going to be making good on my promise to finally do the full kind of build review guide on my Baron shotgun pistols that I've built. The first one kind of got started in the K26 episode that featured the Baron when I discovered it was quite easy to make it into a shotgun pistol. Do excuse the dogs barking, there's nothing I can do about my neighbors. And this one really hasn't, I don't believe, been featured in any way, and it is a Baron that has a sledge fire shell mounted on the front to fire 3 elite darts. As soon as I finished the pair of them, a friend of mine asked me, couldn't you have made them modular? And I felt like a bit of a fool because it hadn't actually occurred to me to do that. And yes, I could. In hindsight, I'm pretty much glad that I didn't, because it really wouldn't have worked as well as I really thought. Because this thing is taller than it is wide, and I would have had to cut down most of the shell to be able to thread on the various adapters. This one would have worked fairly well because it would have been round, but putting this barrel back on, I would have had to cut the shell in ways that it just wouldn't have been pretty. So in the end, while I probably could, I think it would be more trouble than it's worth, and they both function beautifully as is, so I don't feel like taking them apart and scrapping them. But I'm going to go over, again, what I did to them to be able to make them operate the way that they did, because the two did have to be done slightly differently. So I'm going to open them both up, as well as open up a stock one and show you what exactly I have done to them. So here we go. Alright, well, we've got them all open. And the first obvious cosmetic change you may have noticed is that I have added a larger handle, because these Baron handles in my big monkey hands just don't work. So I cut off the handles from some Mavericks that I had previously gutted for their cylinders and added them on, and I chose Mavericks, one, because I had lots of them lying around, and two, because I felt it actually kind of fit in with the general design of the blaster a little bit better than an N-Strike blaster, N-Strike Elite blaster would have, like a Recon or something. So I like how they came out. The one thing I still need to add is some kind of a trigger guard, because they really need them if I want to be able to holster them. So I will eventually be adding that. But for now, they work beautifully. Now, what I had to do to make them function the way that they do now, I don't believe I actually had to increase the catch mechanism spring at all. I did increase the main spring. They don't take K26 because it's, I don't remember why there was, but if you watch the episode that involves the Busby Megas, it can't take K26, but it can take a very significant spring upgrade. Because it does have a huge plunger tube. So I believe it's got its stock spring, as well as I think I ended up putting long strike springs in them, was what fit the best, and that I happen to have lying around. The catch mechanism is actually quite sturdy, and I haven't had any problem with them not being able to catch. Same with the priming mechanism, despite being an offset priming mechanism, which is usually not good for upgrading blasters. This one did not give me any trouble. So in addition to having a very heavy spring upgrade put into it, I have also altered the cylinder itself. Now, to get an idea of what exactly I did, let's take a look at the original. The original has this 5-barreled, or 5-holed cylinder on the inside, and the way it rotates between the two barrels is the entire plunger tube rotates. Every time you prime the blaster, it rotates 1/5 of a rotation, which alternates whether the top barrel or the bottom barrel is the one currently getting the air, which is a much simpler way of doing an alternating AR. It's not like Nerf's Smart AR, where it doesn't matter which barrel you load, it will fire. In this case, you have to load the barrel that corresponds with the way the cylinder is lined up. So if you prime the gun and shoot the top barrel and then prime it twice, the lower barrel is not what's going to be fired. It's rotated all the way back to the top barrel. So you have to keep track of where the cylinder is, or just keep all of the barrels loaded. But that's that's distinctly a disadvantage over a blaster that has a smart AR and can essentially mechanically detect which barrel has a dart in it and fire that one. So I wanted to get rid of that whole mechanism. And so what I did was, first of all, I ground off a couple of the teeth that were involved in the rotation mech itself so that it no longer rotates. And I permanently glued on a sledge-fire barrel on this one. And fortunately, the way the holes line up in the back, 3 of the 5 holes are lining up with sledge-fire barrels, and then I just had to put a little bit of hot glue to seal off the 2 barrels that weren't lining up with anything. And that way, there's air power going to all of them at the same time. And since this is a huge plunger tube with that extra power, it fires it really quite well, which we will see in the firing demos in a little bit. And then I just had to alter the shell a little bit to allow for the sledge-fire shell, because it's, of course, shaped differently than the original barrels were. For the double-barreled one, I did essentially the same thing. Removed the foam gasket that was in there, glued the double barrels directly onto it, but I did have to drill an additional hole. I don't know if you can see it in there. But in order to have a hole lined up with both barrels, I had to drill an additional hole, and then, again, sealed all the other ones, so all the power goes to both. Now, I left the ARs in, just like I did on Eyer's attachment, so that I can fire it with a single barrel loaded. So if I only put 1 dart in, it fires only the 1 barrel. If I put both darts in, then it fires both barrels. And since the ARs are, once again, fairly stout, I'm able to get away with this without losing too much power. In fact, I think the single barrel might have slightly longer range, but we will test that for sure, because I'm curious. Downside of shotgun attachments is because they fire multiple projectiles, it's really hard to get a good chronograph reading on the actual shotgun effect. I could chrono just the 1 barrel, but it really won't do me any good since I don't have the data of both barrels, so it really don't have anything to compare it to. But it's definitely stronger than stock in either case. So let's go ahead and put them back together and go fire some darts in my alley. Now, one other thing that I discovered is there are apparently 2 different models of Baron. It's really hard to tell the difference, but if you look closely, you can see a distinct difference between the 2. One, this mold is slightly sharper, like the angles and stuff are sharper, whereas this one, everything's a little bit more round. This one is also ever so slightly longer. Not by much, but just a little bit longer. As far as I can tell, the internals are identical, and the function is identical, but this one is just a little bit different. And I'm kind of tempted to swap the internals from this one into this one, because this shell matches this one, and that way I'd have matching ones. But alternatively, I kind of like that the 2 different models, the different barrel ones, have slightly different blasters. So, just something I found interesting. Let's get this thing back together. Alright, let's go shoot some stuff. So we will start with the unmodified Baron. And again. Now for the modified Baron, firing a single Mega Dart. And again. And now both barrels at once. And again. Now 3 elites out of the modified one. Okay, so looking at numbers, the stock Baron fires around mid-40s would be what I would say the average is. There was one that dropped a little bit low and one that flew a little bit high, but it averaged around mid-40s. The modified Baron firing single was getting high 50s on average. Sometimes as much as 70, sometimes as little as 50, but averaged high 50s, around 60. Firing both, it was firing mid 50s. A little bit shorter, obviously, but still, it was firing 2 farther than the stock was firing 1. So I definitely consider that a marked improvement. And firing all 3 elites from it, we're getting high 50s up into the 60s. So, and a fairly tight grouping, actually, which is really, really nice. So the Baron, the Mega one had a little bit more spread just because the Whistlers have a tendency to have a more erratic flight pattern because of the whistles, but the Triple Shot had very nice grouping. So all in all, I'm very happy with them. I do want to add trigger guards and come up with holsters of some kind. They don't quite fit in a double AK mag. Definitely don't fit as well as a hammer shot does. They're a little bit loose, so I either need to find some way to modify the double AK pouches so that they hold them better, or I just need to make new holsters for them of some manner. This is something I wouldn't mind carrying in a light loadout as secondaries, just having a pair of shotgun pistols that I can just pull out and obliterate anything. But I'll need to come up with a simple design for holsters, and for that I'm definitely going to need trigger guards. So still a little bit of work, but I'm definitely very, very happy with them. A very simple mod, and since Barons are so incredibly cheap, it's a very cheap mod. One thing that would probably improve this one would be to either remove the ARs, but definitely to rebarrel them, because like most guns, the barrel isn't actually tight until further down, though less so with these than with some others. I also noticed that there seems to be a bit of a difference in the barrel design between the older one and the newer one, which is interesting. But I like this one better, so that works out well for me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.